What's going on, everybody? I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast, and it is a hell of a day to talk ball. And joining me to do just that is Justin Boone. Boone, what's going on, buddy?
What's happening, man? It's been a busy week for me. I finally got over that cold that I had for several days last week. I got to bounce back in my step, and I've been cheating on you a little bit, man. I went on some other shows this week. I don't normally do that during the season, but stopped by a couple other shows, recorded with them, and now I'm back here to preview week 7 with you, buddy.
Well, I'll accept your infidelity because I like you so much. Like, we'll give you another chance here. That's fine. No, it's good. Get out there and spread the gospel of the Yahoo Fantasy Forecast. You get on those other pods, you'd be like, hey, come check out ours. Come check out our YouTube show. The whole big deal. So no, it's good. Boone, you're so great. We could never keep you just under the bushel basket here. Okay, we got to get you out there in front of more people.
That's not the issue. The issue is normally, as you know, during the season, trying to fit stuff in and make time to do things properly and to, not go at anything with less than 100% effort, which is normally my way. So yeah, managed to get it done this week. And yeah, it helped out that I finally got over that cold and got back to being myself and feeling good, breathing well, no coughing, no having to hit the cough button. We're good to go.
Perfect. Well, I expect 100% effort from you today, pal, because we got a big show ahead of us here on the Week 7 preview. First 2 segments for the folks that are new here. We go through Boone's 6-pack of questions where he asks basically just things we need to know, answers we need for all of these given games over the course of this week. Segment number 3, that is literally no one's games of the week. I pick 3 matchups that are not headlines by any means, but you got to care about these lovable little freak shows for fantasy football. And then segment 4, the hurry up offense, rapid fire questions before we end the program. So with that, let's dive into Boone's 6-pack of questions for week 7. All right, Boone. Give us question number 1 for week 7.
Love that sound. I just love hearing that sound every single week. We should play that way more often than just once a week on Thursdays. Anyway, I think the first thing, there's so many injuries that we got to talk about, but let's go the positive route first. So, what should fantasy managers expect from especially all the receivers who look like they're coming back from injuries and one from suspension, of course, this week. But we're getting back a bunch of names this week, right? Rashee Rice finally come back. We've been waiting on that one for so long. Fantasy managers super excited about what he could potentially do. CeeDee Lamb, we got some good news here. It seemed like he was trending that way. Jerry Jones was making his usual comments and kind of tipping his hand about who was going to play this week. Really seems now like CeeDee Lamb is going to play. He had a quote that came out right before we started recording about how he thought he could have played last week, but they were kind of cautious and held him out just in case. So he'll be back. Mike Evans, it looks like he's going to finally return, and couldn't be a better time for that Bucs offense because they have so many injuries. Everyone else there is hurt, and Mike Evans is going to step back in, and got some quotes from Baker Mayfield that really make it seem like that is going to happen this week. We're not 100% sure yet, but that one's trending that way. Quentin Johnston, he could come back this week. He's back to a limited practice. I know you don't want to hear that. You don't want to see anybody hurt, but you would probably love him to take his time coming back so that solidify Ladd McConkey as a top 20 receiver, top 15 receiver, something like that.
Let me just get on the record here. I don't think I need Quentin Johnston to miss games to avoid the pen, eating the pen. Right. Okay, I want to. If I'm gonna avoid the pen, God, yeah, we're safe, baby. I want to avoid it honorably, okay? I've got it right here. Always do. I want to avoid it honorably. Let's get QJ out there. Let's get him in the mix. I'm not afraid.
Obviously, that's what fantasy managers want. Fantasy managers want to see Terry McLaurin back out there, too. He started the week with a limited practice. I thought he was going to have a chance. Today, drops back down to DNP, so we're not sure if he's going to play this week. I would say, if anything, now he's trending to not play in this one. Maybe there was a setback. Totally speculating on that, but we're going to keep an eye on what he's doing out there. And then, way down the list, Jalen Coker is probably going to play this week. We talked about him on Monday, a favorite of ours, a guy that we think could come back and put up some good stats. Not quite on the same level of all the other names I mentioned, but needless, a guy who can definitely produce for fantasy and can definitely get into lineups. Hopefully, maybe you don't want to put him in right away in his first game back, but I think he will be a guy who's in fantasy lineups down the stretch here.
Do you have any hesitation outside of Coker? Fine, I'll grant you that. I'll be serious for a minute. Outside of Jalen Coker, do you have any hesitation about projecting any of these guys for like a full bore workload in their first game back.
I mean, Rashee Rice, it's funny how Andy Reid's been like kind of coy about saying how much he's going to play, but this is a weird one where, yes, he is kind of coming back from an injury because he had the knee injury last year, caused him to miss most of the season, but then he gets an extra 6 weeks. And even before that, we saw him on the practice field. By all accounts, he looked great. They were peppering him with targets. So to get 6 more weeks after that doesn't really make me that worried. I think the concern with him is the thing a lot of people have brought up, that, you know, last year when he was going off, Xavier Worthy wasn't really a thing yet. So now with Worthy out there, how is this all going to come together? That's not a concern for me, because I think everything we've heard from people around the Chiefs organization is that this is their number one receiver. This is the guy they want to build around. I mentioned before on the show, whether you go back to his rookie season, those final 10 games, he was a top 15 fantasy wideout. Last year, before he gets hurt, very small sample size in the first 3 games, but again, putting up those wide receiver 1 numbers. So I think he's going to hit the ground running, and I think it might almost end up being like a good thing that he missed these 6 weeks and kind of got his health all the way back, hopefully. And now he can get out there and produce. CeeDee Lamb, I mean, a high ankle sprain definitely is concerning for a skill position player, because you don't know if that's something that's going to sap some effectiveness when he comes back. But based on those quotes from him and the way he's talking, the fact that he thought he could have potentially played last week, that gives me a little bit of confidence. And I'm not worried at all about like the George Pickens aspect. Like CeeDee Lamb is right up there, arguably the top receiver in the world. He's in that conversation, at least with those guys. This is somebody that even before he got hurt, right? 110 yards, 112 yards in those 2 games, like just phenomenal. He was the number 1 fantasy receiver overall a couple of years ago. So he's done it before. I think he steps right back in and puts up big numbers. And then the question more will be what happens to George Pickens? What happens to Jake Ferguson? Are they going to be able to still come along for the ride? Obviously, Pickens is not going to be a top 5 fantasy wideout like he was when Lamb was out. But I think the amount that this offense has to throw, I mean, they're leading the league in completions right now. The defense is terrible. I think everybody's going to be okay. You know, it might take a little bit off Pickens, of course, drop him down into the wide receiver 2 range, but it's like high-end wide receiver 2 range, and arguably could be a low-end wide receiver 1. We've seen other teams give us 2 top 12 fantasy receivers before, and if there was ever an environment where that could happen and the talent and everything involved, it would be those 2 guys. So I've moved Jake Ferguson down just a little bit, but no, not worried about Lamb at all. Mike Evans, like when I was going back and looking at like all the injuries that he's had, the hamstring thing, it's been like nonstop. Like he's had like, it's been like 7 straight years or something where he's had some sort of hamstring injury. It's really unfortunate. You hope that this isn't something that as he's getting older pops up again, but based on the way that Baker Mayfield was out there talking about it, really seems like they're excited to have him back. That, you know, Baker Mayfield saying that he's a guy that defenses have to account for. And earlier in the season, the numbers weren't great for Evans. Like it was like around 50 yards in those games. I think he scored a touchdown in week 3 before he got hurt. But that was with Emeka Egbuka just totally breaking out at that time. And now we're not going to have Emeka Egbuka, it looks like. Chris Godwin's not going to play in this game. Bucky Irving not going to play in this game. So they're going to really need Mike Evans to step up out there. So no, not really worried about them. Quentin Johnson would be the one where if he's not 100%, is he the kind of player that can actually go out there and still put up big numbers, or will he take maybe a bit of a backseat to Ladd McConkey or to Keenan Allen? So I guess some reservations there. I'm not putting him back up into the top 15, even the top 20. I want to see him at practice a little more, see some confirmation that he is close to 100% or 100%. So I guess he would be the one that maybe, but it's also just based on the fact that those other guys I mentioned are like supreme talents. I think they're on a different level than QJ is.
I think so too. And yeah, I mean, with the Mike Evans thing, that's interesting because he had 51 yards, 56 yards, 33 yards with a touchdown in week 3. Also dropped 3 passes in that game, according to True Media. So 37.5% of his targets were dropped in that game, which happens sometimes with a guy like Mike Evans. You're going to get some of those dropsy games. But yeah, those are a few tough matchups in here. Obviously against Houston, that's a difficult spot. The Jets, typically it's been the number 2 receiver, not the number 1 receiver that's gone off against them, with Sauce Gardner kind of trailing around the field with those number 1 wideouts. So this is definitely a much better spot for him coming back Monday night against a banged up Lions defense. I think we'll talk about that matchup on the Lions side of it later, but yeah, this could be definitely a fast track, very exciting fantasy football matchup. So I'm definitely, if I've got Rice, Lamb, Evans, I'm probably starting all those guys. Just last point quickly on Rashee Rice, because I know he's a player we've talked about a lot. I love that comment that we had on the screen earlier from Patrick Mahomes about it's going to force defenses to either play coverage on them, play deep, like don't, because they've got a ton of speed, right? Tyquan Thornton, Xavier Worthy, not as much Marquise Brown anymore. I'm kind of done talking about Marquise Brown as a speed threat, more like intermediate area at best. But they've obviously got speed downfield, and they've hit those plays a little bit more consistently this year than last year. They just haven't had that like innings eater, the volume guy underneath. So I think it will be fascinating to see if Rashee Rice is immediately back to like that 10 targets type of role, because they have run a lot of RPOs, and he's the type of guy that should be on the other end of those targets, the screens as well. He should be the guy there. But I know they do want to access that deep area as well. So just generally fascinated to see what he looks like. I have Rice in my guillotine league. Shout out to me. I survived long enough to now finally plug him into the lineup. I'm playing him with no reservations, but I am at least just willing to be pleasantly or unpleasantly surprised into what the role looks like in the first game back.
Yeah, hopefully where you drafted him, he doesn't have to step in, depending on injuries. He doesn't have to step in and be your number 1 receiver in your lineup, right? Because you were getting that discount. If you've survived this far, you're able to slot him in as your wide receiver 2, your wide receiver 3, maybe if you're lucky, even your flex. I have one team where I was very excited to bring him back, and then Emeka Egbuka gets hurt last week, so he's just swapping into that spot in the lineup, but that's okay. We'll take it, right? Once Egbuka gets healthy, then my lineup will get that boost. So I'm excited for it, and I think it's a great spot for him to come back to, right? Going against the Raiders, they're giving up the 6th most fantasy points to receivers this year, so I think he can come back. They're going to want to get him going, and I think that's what they've really hoped for this offense. And the injury last year and the suspension this year has just delayed the fact that they want him to be that true number 1 receiver. You go back even to practice, like I was saying, in the summer, and he was getting peppered with targets. The beat writers were commenting that, man, he is catching a lot of passes out here. I think we're just going to see that translate to the regular season now that he's going to be active. So it's super exciting for fantasy, and it's exciting for the Chiefs. Not that they need another weapon with the way Patrick Mahomes is playing and, the path that they've gotten on in the last few weeks here. Not that they need yet another boost, but he's going to give it to them.
All right, let's get into your second question, which is a good jumping off point from the Mike Evans discussion.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that we got to go the other way with it and that this list is even longer than that first list. But what's the fantasy impact going to be from all these new injuries, and especially all these new wide receiver injuries that we had from last week, right? So, of course, the Bucs is the first one, like you mentioned. Emeka Egbuka just having an unbelievable year, and now he's hurt, and it looks like he's going to miss a little bit of time. On top of that, Chris Godwin, we really don't know what's happening with him, right? They're calling it fibula.
Yeah.
We don't know if it's related to that other injury. I mean, they're already ruling him out. Like early in the week, they ruled him out for the Monday night game. So that's not a great sign. It looks like he's probably going to miss a bunch of time. And we talked about that before the season as a possibility, right? At his age, coming back from that serious injury where he had to have multiple surgeries on it. And I said one of the reasons I was very excited about Egbuka was because we weren't sure what Chris Godwin was going to give us this year, when he was going to return. And even once he got back, what kind of player was he going to be? And would he ever get back to the same level based on the seriousness of that injury and based on his age? And it really seems like maybe he won't now. And that's terrible because Chris Godwin has been a fantastic fantasy player for a long time. Seems like a great dude. So hopefully we're rooting for him. We want to see him back out there this year doing something, contributing to this team, especially because this team looks like it can make a run. And then you just go down the list here. The Rams, like losing Puka Nacua, a guy who was emerging as arguably the top fantasy receiver out there, one of the best receivers in the league for sure. He's going to miss at least a week with this ankle injury. Then they have the bye that he can kind of heal up then. And I think they're going to reassess after that. I don't think it's a guarantee that he's going to be back after that. So he's not out there practicing like the Schefter tweet there says. And we'll see what he's going to look like. I don't think he's going to play this week. We'll see what the things look like for him coming off the bye. The Jets, they're not going to have Garrett Wilson for at least a couple weeks here with the knee injury. And to make matters even worse, their second receiver, they don't have a very deep receiver core. Their second receiver, Josh Reynolds, was DNP yesterday, limited today. So he might not even be 100%. And then that puts us down to like the rookie Arian Smith, that maybe Alan Lazard gets out there. I mean, really seems like all signs would point to the rookie tight end, Mason Taylor, getting a lot of volume in this game. He's somebody that we brought up a few times in recent weeks, but man, really, really tough for an offense that was struggling through the air to now not have Garrett Wilson, really the only guy that was having success in the passing game there. DJ Moore, maybe a little bit of positive news on him. He's day-to-day after getting hospitalized in that game on Monday. I mean, he played 94% of the snaps, but then after the game, took him to the hospital. They said it was mostly precautionary. They called it hip and groin, I believe. They didn't really give a ton of details on what it was. Missed practice yesterday. Back out there today, though, in some fashion. We'll keep an eye on that one. He might be able to play. If not, that could be the thing that maybe unlocks a little more playing time for Luther Burden, who I know you have said you think can do a lot of DJ Moore style things out there. And we've seen him start to make some plays and come on. So could be some more opportunity if DJ Moore can't play this week. But that's one we're probably going to have to track all the way through until the weekend. Marvin Harrison Jr., he's in concussion protocol, but he's out there practicing in a non-contact jersey. So that at least gives him a chance to clear this week. Hopefully he does. Would obviously like to see him out on the field. Sadly, talking about concussion protocol, Josh Downs, he popped up in concussion protocol this week, and now he's not practicing. So it's looking pretty rough for him. I don't think he's going to be able to go. And then Ashton Doolin on the Colts as well. He's probably not going to be able to play in this game. He's not practicing either. So I know they got Alec Pierce back last week. Of course, they have Tyler Warren at tight end. They have Michael Pittman. Does AD Mitchell get back in the mix? They were like punishing him based on that game he had a few weeks ago where he cost them the win. But if these guys are going to be out, it almost looks like they have to put him out there unless they want to get like Anthony Gould more involved. Like I doubt they go that road. So get AD Mitchell back out there, give him another chance. We know that he can make some plays and hopefully he cleans up some of those mistakes. And then Calvin Ridley. I mean, this list, Harmon, just goes on and on and
it goes on.
Calvin Ridley, DNP. He has the hamstring injury from last week. It happened early in the game, missed most of that contest. It's not looking great for his week 7 outlook, but another one that we'll have to pay attention to and see if he can get back on the field here.
Oh boy, I don't even know where to go. It was a long list.
You love
bro.
your receivers so much, so we're going over a bunch of them here. Like, does anyone stand out to you there? Like, it must pain you to see all of these kind of big name receivers, guys that would be in fantasy lineups, obviously getting hurt. You know, is there anybody on that list that you want to get into the weeds on here, either because you think they're going to be able to play, or with them out, it maybe opens up some opportunity for somebody else?
Yeah, you're right. Seeing Josh Downs, Garrett Wilson, Puka, Egbuka on here, it's like that's just disgusting. It's heartbreaking, truly, if we want to think about it. But yeah, I think the guy I'm really interested in, if Marvin Harrison can get back in this game, I'm of course really interested in him potentially playing with Jacoby Brissett. Like basically everything I said last week, just roll it back to last week. I'm excited to see him potentially in that offense. We saw Jacoby Brissett have a productive passing game, which I think says more about the Colts secondary than it does Jacoby Brissett, but they also got under center a lot more. I think activated more of the true drop back, kind of over the middle intermediate stuff in the passing game that's there in Drew Petzing's offense. Just Kyler's not going to get to. So that he's obviously a guy I'm really tracking, and I would like to play in fantasy if he is indeed available. From an injury replacement standpoint, I want to call to this YouTube poll we just throw into the chat because it's funny. We have, 2 tight ends listed here in terms of who's going to step up most with injuries to all these wide receivers. And I kind of actually agree. The guy who won the poll here, Mason Taylor at 35%. Yeah, bro, I'm telling you what, if it's Tyler Johnson and Arian Smith and Alan Lazard, yeah, Mason Taylor, who probably got dropped a bunch in leagues last week after he caught one pass against the Denver Broncos. He actually is in a pretty good spot here, Boone, because the Panthers' run defense has been good this year. They've quietly really turned that unit around. Derek Brown is so awesome, and his return has been felt immediately after he missed most of last season. They're still struggling to defend on the back end, mostly like explosive perimeter passes on the other side of J.C. Horn, but I think you can still get them over the middle of the field with tight ends as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, I know that game last week was a big time down game for Mason Taylor. And I say that as somebody who talked him up as a pickup the week before, but there was nobody coming through on the Jets in that game, right? They got completely shut down in that one and yet somehow lingered in the game for as long as they did. It was a really, really strange contest in another country. We're willing to give him a pass there because the week before he saw 12 targets. Like we saw him commanding a ton of volume just 2 weeks ago. So, of course, they could potentially do that again here. And the Panthers are a plus matchup for tight ends, for fantasy tight ends. So, yeah, I think Taylor is a great call. I'm going to have him inside my top 12 this week for tight ends. I think he's a guy that you definitely want to get into your lineup unless you are blessed and you have one of the top tight ends. And there's a handful up at the top that are matchup proof guys that you're playing every week. And other than that, if you are living in the low end tight end 1 ranks, you can pretty much shuffle around and play any number of guys that are available on the waiver wire or that are coming on, or some of the veterans that are still lingering, like a Zach Ertz. It's not a great place to live for fantasy. And yet somebody like Taylor is the kind of guy that could come on here and could potentially emerge as that like true every week starter for you. And I think it might start this week with Garrett Wilson out of the lineup.
Oh man, I had one fantasy team that I was feeling so good about. And I picked up Mason Taylor, even though I had Travis Kelce. I was like, oh, we'll just like see what happens. Kelsey's role could really diminish after Rashee Rice gets back. And then Garrett Wilson goes down with injury. Calvin Ridley was like the top reserve player. He's obviously probably going to miss this game. I got another dude on bye. And now it's like I might have to flex Mason Taylor and play Travis Kelce. So I'm maybe wish casting some of that into existence. Luther Burden is a guy that people are definitely
flexing a tight end, not a great fantasy strategy normally, unless you're in a tight end premium league. That normally leads to losses. Yeah.
Not a lot of bench spots and not a lot of dudes available on the waiver wire that are very exciting, but we'll see if I can talk myself into one of these guys here, which I'll bring up in just a little bit. Luther Burden, though, is a guy that people are definitely wish casting into a bigger role. And if DJ Moore does miss this game, which we obviously don't know, I think this could be a really nice spot for Luther Burden, who is the type of yak player that you probably want to get activated against a Brandon Staley style defense where they're trying to put that umbrella coverage on you on the back end. He's been a guy that he's had some screen work. He's had some work underneath after the catch. Definitely somebody that I'm interested in from a fantasy standpoint. Like, I don't know what his role would be, but he is the direct backup to me to DJ Moore. Like, Olamide Zaccheaus is not going to go into his role. He's not going to become the other guy in 2 receiver sets, the flanker or the X when Rome moves around. It would be Luther Burden. So he is somebody that is still available in a lot of leagues that I would pick up and stick in the end of my bench just to see what happens anyways. But I actually think you could get a start out of him if there's no DJ Moore in this game.
Yeah, I brought up my deep stashes column that I put out every Thursday, and I look at players who are available in 85% of leagues or more. So I use that 15% rostered cutoff and look at guys below that. So that is for like the true sickos, the deep leagues out there. And I've hit on a bunch of guys. The idea is basically, who are the players going to be that everyone's picking up on Tuesday and on Wednesday the week after? You try to get ahead of the waiver wire on that. And Burden was somebody that I wrote up this week for sure, because even though Moore played the vast majority of the snaps in that game, we've seen them making an effort over their last few games to try to get him some plays, even if it is trick plays, that sort of thing. They have still tried to make an effort to get him involved a little more. And we saw in that game where Moore played the majority of the snaps, and yet still we saw Burden set career highs, right? In targets, in catches, finished with 4 grabs for 51 yards in that game. And that's with DJ Moore playing most of the snaps. So if Moore were to miss time, I'm totally with you, where obviously Rome Odunze is the lead guy. He is the top guy in that receiving core. They haven't really gotten the tight ends doing that much out there. And this could maybe be a spot where Colson Loveland could get a little more involved. And yet coming out of the bye last week, we saw Burden get some work. We saw Kalmanunga in the backfield get some work. And Colson Loveland really didn't produce in that game. And you wonder if it's going to take him a little more time. I certainly wouldn't be looking to him as somebody that you want to put in your lineup. He would just be a guy that we're stashing for right now. But Burden is somebody that you could play. And like you said, he's that kind of dynamic playmaker, a guy who you can get the ball in his hands and let him make some plays. We saw him in the preseason make some big plays as well. And that made me excited about what he could potentially do as the year goes along, and whether that was going to require a DJ Moore injury, a DJ Moore trade potentially, maybe, or we just seen a lot of rookies over the years come on as the season progresses, and maybe that could happen here as well. But it looks like there will be a chance for either DJ Moore to not play or DJ Moore to be potentially a little limited in this game, right? If he's not out there practicing in full all week, maybe that's a way that they just get more plays and more reps for Burden throughout the week and get him more involved. So yeah, he would be, if Moore's out, he's in that conversation as it's a risky play for sure, but as a wide receiver 3 flex option this week.
Real quick, what do you think of Jordan Whittington as like a deep stash type guy? It might be a short-term thing, but he is definitely somebody that I think is the direct replacement to Puka Nacua. Not saying he's going to do Puka Nacua's stat production, obviously, but stylistically, there's some overlap between how those guys theoretically should win.
Yeah, we talked about him on Monday's show, I believe, right? If not, I wrote about him in the column for sure. I had his name in there. The opportunity he got last year, he stepped up in his chances, right? He had 8 targets in one game in week 4, caught 6 of them for 62 yards. Week 5, 7 for 89 on 10 targets. Like, he's shown he can produce in the pros. And that another guy where they have him waiting in the wings, and it's almost like that one injury away running back where you're just waiting for that opportunity. Well, if Luther Burden in Chicago can step in and do some DJ Moore things, then yes, absolutely, Whittington can step in and do some Puka Nacua things. And if he gives you 60, 70% of what Nacua can give you, that's the guy that you're going to play in fantasy. Like, that's for sure, right? And yeah, we're never going to expect that he's going to replicate Puka in that offense, but he brings that physicality. He's a very versatile receiver. And yeah, I think they're going to need him to step up in this game because Devontae Adams is up there. He will be the number one. He will step in. Tutu Atwell missed last week. He's dealing with a hamstring injury. We'll see. I believe he was limited in practice so far this week, so we'll see if he can get out there. But Tutu Atwell's still more of that field stretching type, right? He's not a guy that's going to command a ton of volume. And then you look at Tyler Higbee. He had an okay game last week, 4 catches and a touchdown. He would be on the streamer radar with Puka out here. But yeah, the guy that I would look to would be Whittington, who would also be in the wide receiver 3 flex range. And you might not get a touchdown, you might, but those numbers I showed from last year, right? 60, 70 yards. If he gives you that, you are more than happy to get that from a guy that you're picking up just to be that wide receiver 3 flex streamer type.
Worth noting, too, Jacksonville is going to be without Devin Lloyd, their star linebacker, who's been incredible this year. He did not travel to London, and that's obviously critical to defending this type of player in the Rams offense. You need those linebackers to be right and tight in coverage, so that could be something that benefits Jordan Whittington if you're looking to play him in a desperation-based spot. My last point on this, and then we'll throw to the next question here. If there's no Josh Downs in Indianapolis, I think they're going to have to go back to A.D. Mitchell unless they're just done with him, which – based on how excited they were, like overly excited they were with him last year in training camp, that would be a harsh turnaround to all of a sudden just be outright done with him. But he is an interesting player, you know? Okay, so maybe they are just completely out on him. If there's no AD, if A.D. Mitchell plays and Alec Pierce is out there, I actually think Michael Pittman would kick into the slot a little bit to replace some of Josh Downs' work, and that might be good against a very zone-heavy defense. Obviously, with the LA Chargers, beating zone is kind of Michael Pittman's specialty, so I think that could actually cause me to increase his projections here for this upcoming week. Unless we can throw to the next questions, Boone, unless you have anything on that.
Well, I think one thing that we should probably hit on, and because we briefly touched on it twice, I think we skipped it, but the Bucs and the pass catchers there, like what should we expect from them, right? Because if Mike Evans comes back, the way we talked about it on Monday during the waiver wire show was, okay, you have Sterling Shepard and Tez Johnson and Cameron Johnson and Cade Otton at tight end stepping up, and maybe they become interesting plays if all 3 of those top receivers are out. But if Mike Evans comes back, that bumps everybody down. It makes those other guys like, Sterling Shepard, maybe you could play as a flex, but he would become pretty risky at that point. Tez Johnson, then at that point, I think you're just expecting like a big play from him in order to have him as a flex in your lineup. And even Cade Otton, who's someone I initially ranked in the top 12 this week. If Mike Evans is out there, I don't think Cade Otton is the same kind of fantasy play. Could he be a streamer? Absolutely. Is he a top 12 option? I don't think so at that point. So if Mike Evans plays, that just kind of changes based on what we said on Monday when it comes to these pass catchers. It bumps them all down a little bit. So Cade Otton's still somebody you could get in your lineup, but don't expect necessarily top 12 numbers. I would think more of that tight end 2 streamer type, which is fine for a bye week replacement or an injury replacement guy. But yeah, might not have the same kind of ceiling.
All right, let's get to the third question here for week 7. A trade-based question, which we covered a lot of wide receiver trades yesterday, but you've got some other ones to throw out here.
Yeah, we could talk about a position other than receivers here, Harmon. Come on, for once in your life.
We can do it, yeah. Oh, yeah, okay. It's definitely me. I definitely make these questions.
We could talk about like some realistic trade candidates here. And we won't hit on the receivers because like you said, I know you guys talked about them yesterday. But guys who could potentially get moved before the deadline that could either increase their fantasy outlook or maybe increase someone else's fantasy outlook. And if we skip out on receivers, I don't think there's that much to say at quarterback either. Like we saw the Joe Flacco trade happen. That's probably about as interesting as it's going to get from like a fantasy perspective. Anthony Richardson getting hurt is kind of unfortunate because I think he would have been a pretty cool name to see him go somewhere else. Like if he went to the Rams to back up Matt Stafford and get to spend time with Sean McVay and kind of maybe learn there, that would have been like a really cool thing for him. But now he's injured. Don't think he's going to get dealt at all here. So the Russell Wilsons of the world, Jameis Winston, like Kirk Cousins, I don't know that any of these guys are going to get moved. And even if they do, where are they going where it's going to really like move the needle in fantasy, unless we see a big name quarterback go down this week, which we're knocking on wood. We don't want to see that happen for sure. So then you look at the other positions, right? And I think running back and tight ends, there's a bunch of guys here that could be really interesting fantasy wise that I think are worth discussing. And we already mentioned, a couple of them out there, like, Breece Hall, Tony Pollard, like there's some of these names that we have talked about on the show before that just in their current situations, things aren't necessarily great. They're not really hitting their ceiling outcomes, but if you took them and you dropped them on a contender, could something happen there? Yeah, I absolutely think those guys could put up much better numbers, especially Breece Hall. Like, is there not a chance that like Breece Hall is just a very good player and he gets out of that New York environment, out of that Jets organization, and all of a sudden we find out, oh man, this guy has been really, really good for a long time and he's been held back by that team and by the bad quarterback play that they have? I think that is definitely possible. We also got a report from Tony Pauline that Devon Achane could get traded. He suggested Seattle was a possibility. That one's just mind-blowing. I mean, I hope that was a joke or that was like
Seattle,
because yeah, like my brain would just explode. Like if he goes to Seattle, I would think that there's got to be another move involved where they're getting rid of one of their backs, either sending them back to Miami or sending them somewhere else. But that was a very strange one to read and made me do a double take. It does seem like the Dolphins are going to be sellers though. And then you do wonder, okay, could Achane be a guy? I think trading away a running back isn't necessarily the worst thing since they have Ollie Gordon, who looks kind of interesting there. You could draft, you can get running backs fairly cheap. So if you can cash out on Achane at his peak, maybe you do that. I don't really know that he's going to get moved, but he's at least a name that's being thrown out there. So that's one that I want to mention. I think we could put a pin in that one though for now. If we go a little deeper, there's other guys that aren't as exciting, like Devin Singletary. He's the clear number 3 with the Giants now. Could he get moved? Somebody like Jerome Ford too, which is maybe the most realistic one here, where there's some teams out there that could be looking for help, but might not want to pay up for a guy like Breece Hall. So could you see somebody like Jerome Ford go there to either help cover for an injury or just give them some depth? I think he's definitely a name that we could consider getting moved there. But if you look at the other side, you want to play like matchmaker, the Chargers, they've been rumored. They're one of those teams that does have an injury. We got the report over the weekend that Omarion Hampton, how long is it going to take for him to get back? The report was that it's going to be more than that 4 weeks that he has to spend on IR. So we don't know when he is going to come back to the lineup. Not great for fantasy, obviously, but not great for the Chargers, who are down their top 2 backs. Yeah. So they could get some help potentially there, even with Kamani Vidal looking very good in that matchup against the Dolphins. Maybe they could go out and get a vet to pair with him and somebody that could give them a little more stability in that backfield on top of the explosiveness and the big plays we saw from Kamani Vidal last week. Just like a low-cost vet. We're talking about like really bottom of the barrel kind of stuff there. The Bears, being a contender, kind of ascending here. I don't know, because DeAndre Swift had a big game last week coming off the bye. So Are they really going to be looking to spend up and bring somebody in? That would probably have to be for one of the bigger names that would move the needle to kind of overtake DeAndre Swift in that backfield or to pair up with him there. The Chiefs, I think the Chiefs should go out and do something here. Not that I want them to as a Bills fan, but I think they need a little more juice in that backfield. They haven't really gotten it from Pacheco, from Hunt. Rashard Smith, just kind of a part-time player. So if you dropped a Breece Hall or someone into that backfield, what would that look like? I think that would be incredible for fantasy. And I've seen people mention the Cardinals. I would be kind of surprised if they made a move, since it sounds like Trey Benson actually will be back fairly quickly after the 4 weeks on IR. It seemed like that was more of like a 4 to 6 week thing. So I don't know that they need to go out and get a big name. And I don't know if they're a team that really should be buyers at this point, but we'll see. Another one that I wondered too, and no one wants to hear this, but the Commanders. Like, I know Bill Krosky-Merritt, we all love him. You want to see him ascend here as well, but like, could they use like that veteran in their backfield? Could they use someone that's a little more established? And then JCM can kind of be that explosive element next to them, as opposed to kind of being groomed to be that number one running back in their backfield. I wonder if that's what. Am I forgetting any other players? Am I forgetting any other teams? Anybody you want to mention or comment on there, Harmon?
I think there's just, the more you talk about it, the Chargers one, obviously, like if somebody, I can't see them trading for somebody like Breece Hall, because if that's the case, then I guess Hampton's out for the season, and Breece Hall would be like a 1 year rental, and then because his contract is up after this year. So to me, I think if somebody's trading for Breece Hall, it should be to try to make him their guy the next couple years. Like, that would have to be a team like Chicago or Kansas City. But DeAndre Swift coming off the big game, I don't know if they're ready to make that move right this second. I agree with you that Kansas City should do something like that, but they've seemed content with this backfield duo for a while. So I'm a little skeptical about that. But the more you talk about it, the less I find appealing spots for somebody to go to here, and really like not shake up a backfield too much. Arizona would be nice, but yeah, again, are they really a buyer? And also their run game has stunk this year. There's not been a lot of like great run games necessarily. So I don't know. To me, the more we talk about this, the less I feel like there's a lot of chairs available here for a running back to go and make a big difference in fantasy football, outside of maybe that Chicago or Kansas City spot. I'm not sure those are all that likely.
Yeah, and again, we got a little bit of time here, a couple weeks before the trade deadline, so there could be an injury that occurs in the next couple weeks that makes a team a buyer.
Of course.
Not that we want to see that, but it's just the reality of the situation. And then tight end was the other one that I wanted to hit on, because and this one I think is funny that it's not so much like looking for these guys to move teams and being excited about what they could become in a new team. It's more like, let's get these veterans out of the way so that the younger guys can step up and become like strong fantasy options, which I believe a couple of these guys could be. So one would be David Njoku getting traded from the Browns, and now he's dealing with this knee injury. So we're going to have to watch what that turns out to be and whether he's going to miss some time. But it sounds like they're kind of willing to move him, and I think they should be, right? Harold Fanta Jr. looks great. They should get him more opportunity. I think we're going to potentially see this week like a limited run of what he could be as the number one tight end in that offense. And I think it's going to be very exciting, right? One of the few guys out there that you could see, if he gets that kind of volume, could turn into potentially an elite fantasy tight end. So I'm hoping that he's able to get that opportunity, that trial run. And I have him ranked as a top 12 tight end right now this week. So everyone should be playing him if you went out and got him, or if you already had him. And then Mark Andrews, I mean, was rumored to be on the block in the offseason. He ends up sticking around. You know, Isaiah Likely returned to the lineup a couple weeks ago. He's already getting more snaps here. He really should be the starter in that offense. You and I talked about it a few weeks ago when Likely was coming back, and I was saying people should stash him. And we kind of joked that like, it seems like he's going to end up being the starter before the end of the year. I think my question to you was like in the hurry up offense section of like, could it happen before Halloween? Maybe we will see it happen before Halloween if Andrews gets traded, but you wonder where the Ravens are at. Do they think, even though they only have one win on the year, do they think Lamar Jackson's going to come back and they're just going to roll here after the bye and get right back in the mix? If they do, then I doubt that they trade Andrews, but it's a smart organization. And if they have that guy waiting in the wings who they feel so strongly about, then why not move on from the vet, get something for him? And Likely fantasy wise, we've seen limited opportunities where he's gotten to start. He has been great. He is a tight end one for fantasy. So we're kind of, it's wish casting a little bit that if Andrews gets out of the way, we end up with a guy that could potentially be another starting option for fantasy. But I hope that happens, whether it happens this season, whether it happens in the off season. I hope that Likely gets his shot because it really seems like he deserves it.
Yeah, I would love to see a little bit more Isaiah Likely in my life. We'll see, though, if the Ravens view themselves as a contender or somebody that ought to start looking towards next year. My guess is with Lamar, they view themselves as somebody that can at least make a push for it. But we are going to take our first quick break. When we come back, we've got 3 more of Boone's questions to hit for Week 7 right after this. All right, we're back. Boone, you are such a pro, dude, because this 4th question and the first one out of the break here includes many, kind of big time topics in the fantasy football space right now. So let's let it rip, buddy. Again, this is what a pro. We're back from break, hard hitting topic. Let's talk about it.
All right. How should we approach some of these ambiguous backfields going into Week 7? And I mean, I'll highlight them off the top here. I mean, everyone's talking about the Rico Dowdle, Chuba Hubbard situation, including you on this show the other day, including us earlier in the week. So I don't think we need to spend maybe too much time on that one, but Dowdle goes out, he puts up those back-to-back 200 scrimmage yards games, really looks fantastic, right? There's no way around it. I know the matchups were easy, but it puts up bigger numbers than we've seen from Chuba. And Hubbard still dealing with the calf injury, limited in practice this week through the first 2 games. He's not practicing in full. He said he expects to play. Shout out to producer Colin for sending the tweet today about Hubbard out there breaking down the huddle the last 2 days. That's another data point to consider. I mean, he's a captain on the team. They view him very highly. But again, we can't read too much into things like that coming out of practice because I could make the case either way on something like that, right? I could make the case that him breaking down the huddle is him out there and the team out there reaffirming that he is that number 1 guy. Or you could go the other way. You can make a case that maybe that's the coaching staff giving him a little consolation prize because it's hey, buddy, you're still the guy, but we're going with Dowdle this week because you're not 100% healthy. And that's kind of how I think in the short term in this game, it's going to work out. I do think I'm ranking Dowdle ahead of him. I'm ranking Dowdle as a low-end RB2. Chuba Hubbard is a high-end RB3. I think Dowdle gets more work in this game because they don't have to rush Chuba back. And a calf injury is a scary injury. That's something you could aggravate. That's something that could turn into other things, that could turn into injuries that might even put him out for the year. So there's no reason to rush him back and give him this big workload if Dowdle is playing that well. Long term, though, what is it going to mean? And I think this is going to be close to a 50-50 backfield, and it's going to be very, very frustrating for fantasy. I think we talked about it a bit on Monday, right? If you have both these guys playing well and Dowdle earning more of a role, do we go into games where it ends up being a little bit of a hot hand approach? Do we go into games where we think it's going to be Chuba Hubbard and it ends up being Rico Dowdle who goes off? Yeah, that might happen, but I think it's going to be a lot closer to 50-50 than what we saw earlier in the season before Hubbard got hurt. So this weekend, I'm still okay playing Dowdle, putting him in your lineup, and we're going to monitor. We'll see if we get anything from beat writers, any quotes from the coaching staff or from the players to try to figure this out for sure going into the weekend. But even that, I mean, we had reports last weekend from a bunch of different writers that ended up being kind of misleading. And I don't think it was the writers trying to mislead us either. They were trying to make educated guesses and got it wrong, or they might have got information that just straight up wasn't correct from someone around the team, right? And I'm referring to Hassan Haskins being the lead back with the Chargers, which didn't work out that way. I'm referring to, Michael Carter not starting for the Cardinals, and then he actually ends up starting, even though Bam Knight did get more work in that game. But it's a reminder. I had friends messaging me, asking me about that stuff, and I'm trying to parse through it like everyone else and trying to give some clarity. And it's just a reminder, just because we get certain reports, you have to be mindful who it's coming from and actually what the report is and whether it's coming from a place where it seems very concrete or whether it seems like it's a little bit of speculation. And, beat writers and national writers, they're all capable of getting it wrong sometimes, like we all are, right? So just keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out your fantasy lineups. But when it comes to the Panthers backfield, I do think Dowdle is okay to play this week. But I think long-term, it's going to be unfortunate because we might not see the same ceiling from either of these guys because they're going to be split in this backfield more.
Yeah, I mean, and just on the point about, well, two things. One, on Chuba Hubbard being a captain, shout out to Bruce, one of our listeners on Twitter, did let me know, corrected me on this because I said it yesterday too. The Panthers actually have a rotating 4th captain spot, and Chuba was a captain 1 week. So I said the same thing yesterday. But it's I mean, we're splitting hairs here. He still was a guy they decided to make a captain.
Leader
but
in the locker room. The coaching
he's a
staff
leader
has
on, yes, 100%.
When he got the new contract last year, they talked about him being like a guy who sets the example for everyone else there.
Oh, even
like,
before the contract. Yeah, they love him 100%. So, I mean, either way, but just want to be completely accurate here. Yeah, technically he is not a full, because I said it yesterday. So shout out to Bruce for correcting me. But
has been a captain.
He has been a captain in one of those rotating captain spots. Rico Dowdle, what's his captainship? We need to track that for the rest of the season. How many huddles is he breaking down? I love where we're tracking. We've gone from off-season tracking reps in the order, and now we're tracking who's breaking down the huddle. Fantasy Twitter has jumped the shark. That is for sure. Okay, the other thing I wanted to say about just your point about the reports from last week. I said this with Chris Allen on Sunday. And it informs this backfield here too, especially for this first week. Sometimes these reporters say things that, yes, like the team intends. I think it's very possible that the team on Saturday was maybe like the Chargers was thinking Hassan Haskins is going to be our lead back because what we've seen in practice this week. But then Kimani Vidal, either in warmups or even early on in the game, it's like, oh, this is clearly our hot hand. We're going to keep riding that hot hand, and we're going to go over and over again with this guy. And I think there's a real chance in Carolina here. Maybe Chuba Hubbard comes in. He's not full go this week, even if he's fully participating in practice or he's limited participant in practice or whatever. And they see him out there in the cast, like kind of responding a little weird. They dial it back on him, and then it's just full on Rico Dowdle. That doesn't mean it's going to be full on Rico Dowdle every game the rest of the way. This is kind of a moving target. Boone, fantasy, as we know, you and I know, but not everybody talks about it this way. It's not like a predetermined outcome that we're trying to guess right. It's a moving target, So I think that's very clear with this backfield. But I'm generally with you that I'm comfortable ranking both these guys in startable range this week. It's just kind of based on those expectations. And I feel better about Rico, obviously, with what we have seen recently.
Yeah, and maybe the same could be said in terms of ranking guys in a startable range about the next two, right? Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time discussing this backfield, and it really sounds like the beat writers there are suggesting that part of the reason for this like weird usage, or at least what I would call weird usage, since one guy seems more effective than the other, is that they're trying to make sure that Kenneth Walker stays healthy for the whole season, that they have him and we don't have another situation where he gets hurt again, which makes a lot of sense from a real life standpoint. And yet fantasy managers are, of course, going to hate that. Right. And then I'm sure you saw, I think it was the Dan Graziano, like a Buzz article that he writes every week at ESPN.
Yeah. It's him or Fowler, right? I can't remember.
Yeah. He talked about how, there's like this funny kind of line about the actual success running the ball wasn't as important to the team as demonstrated willing to continue to run the ball and avoid turnovers. And that's why they went with Charbonnet over Walker more in that game. I mean, again, one of those frustrating things. And I hate this line, but like, it kind of is what it is at this point, that it seems like we're going to get this kind of split moving forward. It's going to continue to have me ranking Kenneth Walker in that low-end RB2, high-end RB3 range, and Zach Charbonnet in that same range. Walker will always be ahead of him in my rankings because I think Walker has the better chance to explode and have big plays and potentially put up big yardage totals. But Charbonnet is going to hang around in there. He's going to score some touchdowns, and they're both going to be usable for fantasy, and yet the ceiling for these guys is just not going to be the same at all, I don't think, at least to what I thought it was going to be before the season.
Yeah, I just think to me what needs to change in Seattle is less so the split between these guys, and because they're the most run heavy team in the league, and yet from a success rate standpoint, they're 24th in the NFL in overall rushing success rate right now. They need to get better running the ball as opposed to they need to give Kenneth Walker more work. Now, you could argue they give Kenneth Walker more work, then they're going to be a better run game. At the same time, though, you said like all fantasy managers are going to hate the fact that Kenneth Walker's not getting all these touches. They're also going to hate the fact if he gets 20 touches a game and he gets hurt 3 weeks later. And then they're going to be pissed about that. So it's just tough. And this is what I expected this backfield to be split between these two guys. It's been a little more even than probably I expected. So I wouldn't say I fully got this one right, but at the same time, I think it's very live, Boone. This Seattle team is good. And maybe December is Kenneth Walker's month, right? Where like, all right, we've got him fresh enough. Now it's time to just start letting him cook. The run game really comes together. It's still a new offensive staff there. So I'm still advising patience with Kenneth Walker, and you just got to kind of live with that volatility. But I want to see this whole run game get better. So I'm just trying to bring some balance to the Kenneth. Not that you aren't doing this, but I think the rest of fantasy Twitter is not doing this. I'm trying to bring a little balance to this Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet split here. And obviously the Seahawks are accomplishing some balance here.
Yeah, I mean, I have teams where I've actually benched Walker. I've been fortunate that I have other options, and I've benched Walker on those teams. But again, I'm holding him for that same kind of reason, that maybe eventually he does get the opportunity. A couple more backfields I want to run through quick. I know we got a lot to get through, but Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears with the Titans. That's one where Tony Pollard not giving us ceiling games. He's only had 2 double-digit fantasy point games this year. Not what we expect from him. Just kind of this boring volume guy. Tajay Spears comes back a couple weeks ago, and last week's game, I mean, he ends up playing more, and it's a trailing game script. And there's some talk, like we said earlier, that maybe Tony Pollard could get traded. I think there's going to be a lot of trailing game scripts for the Titans. So Tajay Spears is somebody that is very interesting. Tony Pollard, just kind of that boring RB3 option. You kind of need him to find the end zone in order to come through for you. Where Tajay Spears, if he ever gets this lead back job, like we saw in the final month last year, he can certainly give us big days and potentially help you win some weeks there. So that's one to keep an eye on. And then the Texans backfield with Nick Chubb and Woody Marks, just worth revisiting. And the reason for it is we saw Woody Marks have that huge game a few weeks back. And then in their last time out before the bye, it was this blowout against the Ravens. They end up using Chubb more. They end up getting other running backs involved later in the game, so they don't even give Woody Marks like that garbage time volume. But coming out of the bye now, they have very tough matchups. Like they have to face the Seahawks, the 49ers, the Broncos. They still have games against the Bills, the Chiefs, the Chargers. They're probably going to be trailing in those games, and I think those game scripts are going to favor Woody Marks. So do not drop Woody Marks. There is still a good chance that he is going to make an impact on your fantasy season.
All right, let's get to your 5th question here, which is, I teased it earlier, a little Jared Goff question.
Is this a smash spot for Jared Goff on Monday Night Football? I definitely think it is. And I feel like I want to thank him because he is one of the easiest guys to project for fantasy. We've talked about the indoor-outdoor splits. You just layer on that the matchups, right? Like, what was the good outdoor game he had? It was against the Bengals. We knew he was going to do that. What was the bad indoor game he had? Well, it was against the Browns. Like, it's so easy to kind of figure out what he's going to do. This game on Monday night, second highest projected point total of the week, 52.5. I think he is going to go out and have a fantastic game against that Bucs team that is banged up. I don't think they're going to be at full strength, but on the Lions side, their secondary is completely banged up. Their defense has injuries. That's why we're going to get a ton of points in this one. The Lions are back at home. They're in the dome. I think you want to play everybody in this offense. The only guy that maybe you would question would be David Montgomery on the ground, because traditionally the Bucs have been pretty good against running backs, and yet this year they're allowing the 10th most fantasy points to running backs, and it hasn't necessarily been rushing yards. It's been touchdowns. It's been receiving work. Sounds like that would really favor Jahmyr Gibbs in this one. So David Montgomery still just like an RB3 flex option for you. Probably needs to find the end zone to come through, but obviously you're playing the Sun God. Obviously you're going to play Jahmyr Gibbs. And then I think Laporta is a game where he can go off, and Jameson Williams is somebody that we've talked down, but I kind of think Harmon in this one, he's going to be able to come through. So I think he's a guy that you would be looking to for a spiked week in what's going to be a very entertaining game, I think, on Monday night.
I was going to ask you what's your kind of expectations on Jameson Williams, because he's definitely somebody that's been so up and down for people. You think this is a good spot for him?
I do think, and we're going to have to pick our spots, but I think this is one against that Bucs team, that pass funnel Bucs team, with a point total like this where he will be able to come through for sure.
All right, well, that's definitely good for the people who have Jameson Williams, including me in my guillotine league that survived with Rashee Rice. Again, shout out to me. Quentin Johnson not been available the last week, so I'm going to have to probably go to Jameson Williams if QJ can't suit up. So these are my problems, maybe not the people's problems. Maybe we share the same problems. Let's get to your 6th and final question here, quarterback landscape of the week.
Well, I've just framed it as who's starting at quarterback, and there's a few teams where we're not totally sure yet. So you look at the 49ers, Brock Purdy and Mac Jones, they're both practicing this week. We obviously think that Brock Purdy is the better player. You and I have said that once he's healthy, he's back out there. He's the starter. We just don't know whether he's healthy or not. Mac Jones also fighting through some things. So we got to watch this one all week long to see who is going to play. It kind of seems, I mean, we got a report here. This must have come down more recently that it looks like Mac Jones is trending to start this Sunday. And that's just playing it very, very cautious with Purdy, making sure that once he's back out there, he is 100% healthy and doesn't have a setback, doesn't miss more time, which is smart also because the way Mac Jones has been playing, he's been keeping them in games. He's been producing, so why not let him start another contest here? So it's one to watch just to make sure that's what happens this week. But as a fantasy manager, a guy who has Brock Purdy on some teams, I would be happy about this. I would want Brock Purdy to sit down one more week and come back once he's 100%. Carson Wentz and J.J. McCarthy, obviously my guy J.J. McCarthy, do they want to slow play this one? And, I get it. Would you want to put him back out there against the Eagles defense after he struggled earlier in the season? Though I will say that second game where he struggled, it was against the Falcons. Falcons defense looks pretty legit. So maybe that wasn't all on McCarthy.
Yeah, it's a good point.
But, do you want to put him back out there in a tough spot, or maybe you want to get him back out there once he's 100% and maybe in a slightly easier spot? So Carson Wentz isn't 100%. Carson Wentz is a guy that I have at least put in my rankings this week as if I think he is going to start. And if he's out there, that's probably okay news for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. He can keep the trains on track and keep those guys producing. So that's one that we'll be watching all week. And then the other one we've already talked about a little bit, and it's the Kyler Murray, Jacoby Brissett thing, where it really seems like fantasy managers are hoping that Jacoby Brissett's out there. And it seems like it's going to happen again because Kyler Murray's been practicing in a limited fashion with that foot injury, but Jacoby Brissett getting the number 1 reps in practice. So are they doing the same sort of thing like they did last week, where even though Kyler Murray was practicing, he was not practicing in a way that made it seem like he was going to start? Kind of seems like that's the road they're going down in this one. And like you alluded to earlier, that is pretty good news for Trey McBride, who found the end zone last week with Jacoby Brissett out there. And if Marvin Harrison can play in this game, I think it would be a positive for him as well, because we saw Brissett last week, like over 300 yards, throws for a couple touchdowns. He can maybe do more with this passing attack than what we've seen from Kyler Murray, who hasn't even really been a good fantasy asset this year. He's been like a QB2 streamer. So let's maybe see him sit down and get healthy, and let's see what this passing offense can do with Jacoby Brissett under center one more time.
Yeah, I don't think the coaching staff minds that either, because I think they see that they're in a little bit of a heat-based situation right now there in Arizona. So I don't think they mind Jacoby Brissett being out there, maybe just being a stabilizing force. And yeah, Carson Wentz, I guess, is better than J.J. McCarthy for the pass catchers in fantasy football. But, man, at some point we got to see McCarthy. Like, if he's not healthy to play this week, that's totally fine. But at some point we got to see McCarthy. They did not give up the assets that they need. Like, they did not give up the chance to just sign Sam Darnold to bring in other players and that whole deal. Like, the whole point was getting on the rookie contract timeline. So I think once McCarthy's healthy, we see him, because I don't think Wentz has been all that impressive, but he is probably, for this game in particular, good news for Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, et cetera, et cetera. Last thing before we toss the break, I'm just curious, like, when are we going to hear something about Aaron Jones? I feel like we've heard nothing about Aaron Jones on IR, and that matters for my Jordan Mason team. So just we don't have to talk about it, but just something I wanted to put on the radar, because I have heard literally nothing about it. But that's maybe just too much focus on J.J. McCarthy there in Minnesota to get any Aaron Jones reports. All right, we are going to take another quick break. We come back, we'll get into literally no one's games of the week right after this. Welcome back. Let's get into my literally no one's games of the week. If the bottle top, one fires me up in the first segment, that one always makes me think like, all right, let's get into some sleepy games here. Make me drift off just a little bit. All right, let's get into nobody's games of the week here. Producer Colin was giving me crap in the break that these are not gross enough games. I don't know, pal. I think these are pretty disgusting, including and especially this first one, Dolphins at Browns. The big news out of this game, Boone, is that apparently the winds up there in Cleveland might be 50 to 60 miles an hour. So Tua and Dylan Gabriel, 50 plus passes again in this one. What could possibly go wrong?
I don't know. We'll see what happens. Like, often you see these sensational weather reports early in the week,
yes,
and people massively overreact to them. And by the time the game comes around, the weather is completely different from that, right? So everyone should keep that in mind. Keep an eye on the weather reports, of course. There's going to be thunderstorms in this game as well. I think that's almost guaranteed. We'll see what the wind looks like and whether it's that strong or not. But regardless, yeah, I mean, it's not good news for the pass catchers in this game, but it probably already wasn't going to be a great setup for the pass catchers in this game. And, Devon Achane relies a lot on his production through the air as well, even though it's short passes. So do you worry about him a little bit too? Cleveland's run D is strong, so they might be able to slow him down on the ground. But yeah, I would always caution people, don't overreact to weather reports about games that are on the weekend or on Monday. Don't overreact to them on Thursday or even Friday. You got to wait until Sunday morning before you really factor all of that in completely. But yeah, that's the only thing I would say about this game. Other than that, Quinshon Judkins is going to run wild on that Dolphins defense. We've seen everyone else do it. Now we're going to see this star rookie come out and put up a huge day here. If he's going against tougher defenses and he's putting up 70 scrimmage yards on average against them, man, he is going to just destroy. It was Rico Dowdle, 238, a touchdown. Breece Hall, 111. James Cook, 118. Kamani Vidal last week, 138, a touchdown. Ramondre Stevenson went for 142 against this deal. Like, holy man, what is Quinshon Judkins going to do in this game?
Can we get that graphic up between the Dolphins and the Browns and their offensive per game stats? I'm not sure if you noticed this here, Boone, but look at how remarkably similar these are. Dolphins, total yards on the season, 300 per game, 209 through the air, 91 rushing yards per game. Cleveland Browns, 298 total yards per game, 208 passing yards, 91 total yards or 91 rushing yards per game. What these are like the same teams, and now they're going to be playing, and they've got these, duck-armed left-handed quarterbacks back here. I mean, this is just like a funhouse mirrors sort of game, like clowns looking at each other in funhouse mirrors sort of game here. I mean, we're going to get some weird stuff, but I agree with you. This should just be the Quinshon Judkins game. I mean, they got to get that 91 yards rushing up on the Cleveland Browns side. We got to get way more than that here against the damn Dolphins defense.
And it's pretty wild. Last I checked, the Browns are favored in this game too, right? Maybe that's because they're at home.
Woof.
But you wouldn't have thought there'd be many games this year where the Browns were favored in. And yeah, even Mother Nature's just like, this isn't interesting enough. Let's just throw some weather on top of it to spice things up. So that's where we're at with that one.
I will say, I think I'm still starting Jalen Waddle in this game, even if it is windy conditions, even if it is kind of a tougher matchup. The Browns defense is good in the secondary. They play a lot of man coverage, but it's funny. It has not happened the way that I thought it might happen, Boone, because of the Tyreek Hill injury. But part of the thesis of Jalen Waddle is, well, if Tyreek Hill starts getting deprioritized or even traded midseason, you're going to see Jalen Waddle just immediately dropped into that number one receiver role because he can do it. And man, some of the takes on Jalen Waddle the last few years have just been so bad, and it's by people who just don't understand football. It's like, the efficiency metrics drop off. He sucks. He's not good. No, please. Jalen Waddle's obviously a baller if you just watch him play. And all he needed was to just get higher up in the progression because the quarterback here just gets rid of the ball so fast. I mean, give me a break. Like, now that he's higher up in the progression, he's actually just getting the football. Like, that's all it took. So I think he's had a great last couple of games, and even in a tougher spot, the weather, the whole deal, I'm still starting Jalen Waddle if I have him. I'm still ranking him as like a wide receiver 1, maybe high end wide receiver 2, but I would still say wide receiver 1.
I have him as a high-end wide receiver too, just factoring in the Browns defense, the potential low-scoring nature of the game, the weather, all that sort of stuff. That kind of bumps him down a little bit for me. I think you could start, and I already talked about Harold Phantom, but I think you could probably start both tight ends in this game as well.
Yeah.
Darren Waller, a little limited in practice this week, so we'll watch to see if that turns into anything. But as long as these guys are healthy, and on the Phantom side, if Njoku's out, I think both those guys are going to be in the mix as top 12 tight ends this week, even with the weather, because again, if things get kind of condensed and we got to, not be able to throw deep, who are they going to throw to? It's going to be a lot of backs, a lot of tight ends, a lot of short area passes where somebody like Jalen Waddle can do fine. He can catch a lot of short stuff and make something out of it. But yeah, I don't think there's a lot exciting on the Brown side other than looking at Judkins and looking at potentially Harold Fannin if Njoku's out.
All right, next one up here, Patriots at Titans. I mean, this one's interesting in so much of like how much of a hammer is Mike Vrabel looking to come in here and drop on his former team, the Tennessee. This is Boone. You've talked about a lot. You've been on revenge game watch all season long. This is maybe our first coach revenge game, right? Mike Vrabel unceremoniously fired, although the Titans just fire everybody, so maybe he can't take it that personally. But he was unceremoniously fired by the Tennessee Titans, and now he's with the New England Patriots. Of course. Talk about a distinct difference here as we're showing up some of the per game stats for the Patriots offense versus the Titans offense. I mean, this is a start Drake May. This is a start. I think you can start Ramondre Stevenson in this game against the Titans run defense that is giving it up, particularly to gap scheme runs, which the Patriots run a lot. I think you can start Stephon Diggs in this matchup. Shoot, I think you could go down the booty road one more time. You know, you can walk down that booty road. Kayshawn Booty could be playing for you in this game. You got to accept some volatility, but all right. Yeah, it is an odd sentence, but you know what? The Booty Boys are out this week against the Tennessee Titans here, okay? I feel like this is a moment where if you're chasing Kayshawn Booty's ceiling, this is the week to do it against the Tennessee Titans. So, yeah, I'm very much in on the Patriots dropping a hammer here on Tennessee.
Yeah, 6.5 point favorites. Just, you know, a game that is setting up so perfectly for that revenge angle. I considered putting it in the 6 questions earlier in the 6-pack, just because I have been on all those revenge games this year. And yeah, I think people should be bumping up all the Patriots. I totally agree with you. And we've seen like Ramondre Stevenson has had some like quiet games where maybe he finds the end zone, but the yardage total is low. But I just referenced one where he had a big yardage total. I think this could be that kind of game for sure. I think they are just going to lean on them. And I don't think the coaching staff, the change in coach isn't going to change a thing for the Titans. The problem isn't just the coach. The problem is the talent level that they have on that team. And they're not going to be able to keep up with a Patriots team that is on the rise here. A Patriots team that looks great, that has a quarterback in Drake May who's spreading the ball around, doing some, dare I say, Josh Allen-esque things where he's getting everybody involved. He's finding who's open, and he's throwing it to them. So you're going to see some weeks where it's the Stephon Diggs show, but then you're going to see some weeks like last week where it's the Kayshawn Booty show, where we see Demario Douglas make some big plays, almost come away with a second touchdown as well. And yeah, this is a spot where you want to get those Patriots into your lineup.
I totally agree. You got to get these guys into your lineup. On the Tennessee side, I got nothing for you, buddy. Any sort of are they going to get the post coach firing bump? That happens sometimes. I don't really see it.
I don't think it's the case. I don't think it's a lack of motivation. I don't think it's anything like that where a new coach can come in and light a fire. I just don't think they have the players to get this done. And you have a backfield that's going to be split. And if they fall behind, it's going to be Tajay Spears getting a bunch of work there. So how high can you actually rank Tony Pollard? Can you actually feel comfortable having him in your fantasy lineup? I don't know that you can. I would try to get him out of it if you can. And then, you look around, like Calvin Ridley is hurt and potentially not going to play in this game. So then you go to Alec Manor and you look at like Van Jefferson was one of the top receivers last week.
Nope.
Like it's pretty sad. And even like Chigakonkwo right now, we have Gunnar Helm, the rookie tight end, who's starting to get a little more work as well there. So it's a weird offense, and it's a team that is just locked into this section. Like every week, you can basically guarantee the Titans are going to be one of the 6 teams you're talking about when you're going over nobody's games, because they are just like the quintessential nobody's games team. Like they should have like a trophy in their honor for being in this spot so many times this season, because we should go back and look at whether they've been in it every single week, because they may have been.
I think they might be, and it's probably mostly been, well, now for the rest of the season, I don't know, maybe we tried to rationalize a few things early on in the year. Now I feel like for the rest of the season, it's going to be the exact conversation we just had, which is, wow, this team's going to come in here and lay a hammer on Tennessee, and probably don't want to play anybody on the Tennessee Titans. So sometimes like the best thing you can do in fantasy in the offseason is just identify, and this is kind of what we tried to do with the Nate and I did the show with ADP rank versus like projected points and the whole deal. Yeah. Just try to identify that one super disappointing offense and just don't touch any of the players in fantasy. Just like, oh, Calvin really projected for a lot of targets. Don't care. Oh, Tony Pollard could be like a very useful. Don't care. That would be the thing. Is we didn't talk about them in that episode because nobody was projecting the Titans to be that good anyways. So, but then what you don't want to do is do the other thing where, oh, well, they could be interesting. No, just avoid it. Completely avoid it. All right, let's talk about the last game here in Nobody's Games of the Week. Giants at Broncos. Boone, does the Jackson Dart Cam Scattaboo vibes fest continue here in a little bit of a tougher matchup?
It's a tougher matchup, so we're going to lower the ceiling on those projections, but I think it does. Like, we saw them have a pretty tough matchup with the Eagles last week, and they continue to produce. And Jackson Dart just has that ability to find open receivers. He's running a whole bunch, which is boosting his fantasy stock. And then for Scattaboo, massive volume there, and he's delivering, and he's delivered even in tougher matchups. So I don't think it's going to be a situation like the Jets where they just completely threw up on themselves in that game last week and weren't able to do much of anything on offense. I think the Giants will have some answers. They'll stay competitive in the game. I still think they're going to lose. Don't get me wrong. I'm not projecting a Giants win in this one by any means. I think they're outclassed by the Broncos. But I just think, looking at what we've seen and the way that these guys are playing, that Jackson Dart and Cam Scattaboo are going to be able to produce more weeks than not. And yeah, Scattaboo, like, I mean, Denver hasn't been flawless. I don't want to act like they're some like perfect team, like, especially going against running backs. It's not a great matchup for Scattaboo, but the Broncos have given up some yards, some points to running backs. Like, prior to that game in Europe last week, 88 scrimmage yards and a TD to Saquon, and Saquon hasn't had a ton of huge games this year, so that's notable. 71 yards to Chase Brown, which for Chase Brown in 2025 is a pretty good stat line. 129 and a touchdown to Marion Hampton, 215 and a touchdown to Jonathan Taylor, 89 to Tony Pollard, another guy who hasn't had a ton of big games this year. So I think Scattaboo, with the kind of volume he's getting, with the fact that we saw Tyron Tracy Jr. come back last week and not really take much away from him, that yes, Scattaboo is going to be able to put up another good game. Now, if you want to figure out what's going to happen with the receivers and the tight ends for the Giants, good luck there, because I think it's going to be a tough matchup, and you might not want to play any of those guys. But yeah, Dart is in the streamer conversation, and Cam Scattaboo is like a high-end RB2, borderline low-end RB1 because of that volume.
Yeah, I mean, as long as he continues in this role, brother, he's just going to keep going every single week. He's going to catch those passes. He's going to be involved around the goal line. Not 3 touchdowns every single week, obviously, but he's going to be involved as that sort of, like you said, high-end mid RB2 the rest of the way. Broncos offense, I feel like we've been saying the same thing over the course of the season. Like, why is this offense so why do they kind of they've still got the bumper cars up, like the bumper lanes up for Bo Nix. They haven't really let him go. They haven't, and is that they don't trust him to, or is this just how Sean Payton's designing offenses? And I found this interesting, Boone. I was researching overperforming wide receivers. I wrote a piece for the website. We're reading again in 2025. Overperforming wide receivers and sort of the guys that are outproducing their volume, basically. Cortland Sutton actually ended up being one of them.
And
I think this is a good. Yeah, I think this is a guy who it's a good matchup for him this week, right? So we could talk about that, but I just wanted to note that he's kind of viewed as this metronome, consistent wide receiver, because he's a boring old veteran, basically. But he has 2 games with 1 reception on the season, and I think the reason for that is he's only 17th in air yard share. He's 29th in wide receiver target share because they're kind of run heavy and they are mid-level in terms of time of possession per drive. And then the biggest thing is they're 21st in time of possession per drive. And then the biggest thing is they lead the NFL. They're tied with Arizona. They lead the NFL for first in screen passes on the season. They kind of do some of this Mickey Mouse stuff. Cortland Sutton has 0 screen targets on the season. He only had 3 all of last year. So when he's just a guy that can go stretches where he's not involved in the offense. I don't think that's a problem for this week, Boone, but I think it's something to know about him for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm going maybe the other way with him, that I actually think he's somebody people might want to buy low on right now because he's coming off of that game where he had to go against Sauce Gardner. The numbers weren't really there in that one, but if you look at before it, I mean, he finished as a top 20 fantasy receiver in 4 of his first 5 games, had at least 99 yards and or a touchdown in those 4 games, remains unchallenged as the number 1 receiver. Like we've talked about Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims, but all those guys rotate. And Pat Bryant has not taken on a big enough role where he's challenging for big time target volume. And then you look for Sutton. I mean, 6 of his next 9 opponents are top 10 in fantasy points allowed to the position. The next 2 here are top 3, the Giants and the Cowboys. So I think we could see some real spike weeks from him in those games. And I kind of think he is like, although there is some ups and downs, he's a pretty solid wide receiver 2 for fantasy that can give you some wide receiver 1 week. So he's somebody that I would be willing to go invest in, especially because everyone, if they were up on Sunday morning, saw that game where he did not have big stats. So I think he's going to come back with a couple good ones over the next couple weeks.
Yeah, I don't think I disagree with you that he's a nice buy low candidate. I think you just have to know that there are occasionally going to be these type of slower games for him. Like, remember, there was a game last year when they went to New Orleans, and I don't think he had a target the entire game. I think he had one that was called back to penalty. So, like, they're very infrequent. It's just the floor. He doesn't hit the floor often, but when he hits the floor, it is low just because they have so much Mickey Mouse stuff. And as long as no one else emerges in this offense, I think that's fine. So the Pat Bryant stuff, we'll see. Troy Franklin is what he is. Marvin Mims definitely is what he is. That has not changed. He is still just a gadget guy. So as long as that stays consistent, I think then Sutton will be fine. So I don't think we totally disagree there. I just think that's something to note. And for this week, I think Courtland Sutton's probably a pretty good fantasy starter. But all right, with that, let's take our final break. When we come back, it's the segment that is sweeping the nation, the Hurry Up Offense. We will get into that right after this break. All right, we are back. Final segment of the show. This is where Boone and I go rapid fire the rest of the way, forcing each other to answer a question, react to a bold prediction, whatever, in 40 seconds or less. The only twist is one guy can throw the challenge flag, which can only be thrown once during the segment. If you throw the challenge flag, the other person has to expand on their answer, thoughts, etc. So with that, welcome to the Hurry Up Offense. All right, Boone, as always, you get to go first. Give me your first question for the Hurry Up Offense.
All right. How would you rank the Packers wide receivers in terms of their fantasy value rest of season? And we will throw out Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden, Christian Watson, apparently looking good according to Matt LaFleur. He could be back soon. Dontavian Wicks, Jaden Reed, probably not back to later in the season. How would you rank these guys?
God, I hate the Packers receiver room for these type of questions. I think number 1 is Romeo Doubs. Like, enough already with doubting Romeo Doubs. He's out there for every single snap. He's getting important targets. He's really, really improved. I think he's the clear answer. After that, I think I go Matthew Golden. Didn't get a playing time bump, but did look good on the field. I think he will have some big weeks. Would like to see him play more, but probably not going to happen. After that, I honestly don't care. Then I think it's a complete toss-up. Reed, when he's back, I think will be good. I'm really looking forward to him being back. I don't know what we're going to get out of Christian Watson. I guess he would be the next one up. Wicks is also hurt as well, so there you go.
All
right. My question for you, Boone, how freaked out are you about the Texans' offensive line versus a ferocious Seahawks defensive line on Monday night?
Yeah, it's definitely problematic, though I will say they're coming off a bye, so hopefully they had plenty of time to prepare for this. And what happened last week when the Falcons went up against the Bills, right? They had that bye week to get ready for that matchup. They came out looking very good and kind of dominated the Bills in that game. So maybe the fact that they're coming off bye will help the Houston Texans offense, because that is not a great unit. That is definitely an Achilles heel for their entire offense, and we'd like to see that unit come together a little bit for a guy like Woody Marks to maybe eventually emerge from that running back room as well. All right, next one up here. Which NFL roster has the most quality depth at wide receiver? Is it the Buccaneers, which we're kind of seeing them have to play a lot of their depth this year? Or is there another team that you feel like they have more depth at receiver?
Wow. Bucks are really good at this point because Tez Johnson can play a little bit. That's a good one to suggest. I think the Packers have good depth. The Packers do have good depth. Like Dontavian Wicks being your 4th receiver is not that bad. I know he burned us all in fantasy last year or whatever. They've got some pretty good depth. I would say Indianapolis, if A.D. Mitchell was a serious person, I would say that they have some really good depth because their 1 to 3 is pretty good. I'm sure there's one I'm forgetting, but those are kind of the ones off the top of my head.
All right. Yeah, that's a good answer. I'll accept that.
All right. Do you believe in DeAndre Swift?
I don't. And it seems insane because he helped me win our little primetime picks game that we do.
You don't have to bring that
live
up.
every Sunday morning. He came through for me as my final pick in that last week. Had a huge game coming off the bye, even though that seemed like it was going to be a time when they had an opportunity to maybe get Kyle Monangai more involved, get somebody else out there, and yet Swift keeps getting it done. So I don't believe in him. No, he's not somebody that I'd want on my fantasy team. I would be looking to trade him away off that big performance, especially because it was in prime time. So the value gets pushed up that much more. But it seems like he's going to be the back there. I don't think they're going to go and make a move to get anyone now. So people maybe should, but I don't. Which city outside of the U.S. would you like to see host their first NFL game in future seasons? Because this weekend, I believe, is the final game in England. I think we have games coming up later in the year in Germany and Spain. Which city would you like to see globally host the game?
Let's get Sydney, Australia in the mix. Why not?
Ooh.
I mean, that's a big trip. I think
It's a long flight
for some of these football. It's a long. I'm sure if any NFL player heard that, they'd be like, "Shut up, bro," because I'm sure they hate. I'm sure they hate this stuff. This has got to be just. I'm sure none of them could say it because it's all about grow the game initiative, whatever. But
of course,
that one I think would be interesting. I don't know what the football interest is in Australia, but. I think that one would be interesting. I'm curious. Do you have a thought? I'm actually curious. With 7 seconds left, do you have a thought on this?
I don't. I know, looking at like where numbers have come from over the years, that Australia is certainly a spot. South Africa and South Korea was one that popped up.
That's
there's
a
good football following in South Korea as well. So yeah, shout out. But they're hitting the right ones in England and Brazil. Like those are definitely places where people are big fans of the NFL. All right,
my next one here. Yeah, my next one here. Will Liam Cohen's comments about making Travis Hunter the first read more often, getting him more involved in the passing game, will that help keep him and me out of the coping corner?
It will help keep you out of the coping corner. I don't know if it's going to help keep Hunter out of the coping corner because, like last week, if we say this and then he comes out and has another bad game, it only kind of pushes him further down that road. So no, I am still not that excited about Hunter. I want to be. This is a guy that I loved before the season, but I just don't think that it is going to happen in this offense for him this year. I wonder if that's just sort of something Liam Cohen is saying to kind of back the reporters and everyone off so that they stop bothering him, at least for a short period of time. And I say that as someone, like I said, that really wants Hunter to succeed. I am in no ways like hoping that he fails here, but I'm really worried that in this offense, with the way he's looked so far, it is just not going to happen for him. Last question.
Real quick, before you do your last question. Real quick, before you did your last question. Did you see Skip Bayless did a 28-minute breakdown on why it was a mistake for Travis Hunter to get baptized before last week's game?
I did see that it was 28 minutes long. I didn't watch
28 minutes? No, obviously.
But yeah, 28 minutes, man. I mean, incredible.
Interesting.
Incredible that he does that.
Everyone's got to take on something.
All right, last one. This is the one I was going to try to get in last week, and we had to push it back. If football didn't exist and you had to cover a sport, which sport would you shift to?
I don't know. Like,
there's only so many sports. It can't be that hard of a question.
Yeah, but I don't really like any of the other ones, so...
Do the reception perception skills in breaking down the film, could that
that's the
over
thing.
to another sport?
I don't think so. I feel like probably golf. That'd be like a good hang, Be outside a lot, being around some good looking scenery. I feel like I could do golf. I'm terrible at golf, but I think I could cover golf.
It seems like a nice one to cover. Yeah, good environment. People seem very nice. Yeah, although the fans are getting a little wild these days in golf at some of the courses, but that's a good one.
Oh, okay. Got to keep it spicy, but I think that would probably be my correct. What a dumb answer. Golf. Unbelievable. Okay. All right. That is going to do it for today's show. Boone, hell of a program, man. That was a packed freaking show. Appreciate you doing it, buddy, as always. And we will see you Sunday morning on Fantasy Football Live for you to, crush us all once again in the Primetime Picks contest, buddy.
It's like become a weekly staple. It's just boosting my confidence every week. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Boone really needed a confidence boost. A very, very lowly, not confident guy at all. He really needed that confidence boost, that's for sure. All right. Well, we look forward to that. Make sure to check out Fantasy Football Live, 11 a.m. Eastern, right here on this YouTube channel. Meanwhile, if you're looking for some Q&A action, John Daigle, look at that beautiful face right there. He's got his start sit tips every Friday on this channel as well, so make sure you tune into that. As for this show, we will be back on Sunday. The recap with Chris Allen will both be live together as soon as the late game window ends. So when Commanders Cowboys hits 000, join us right here on YouTube to recap it all. Until then, we are out.